Hey everyone, I'm Trent Custers, co-founder and studio director at League of Geeks, and this is the Game Maker's Notebook. Today we have an absolutely insightful conversation with a wonderful guest. It's hard not to be energized when chatting with Ben Brode, the Chief Development Officer at brand new studio Second Dinner. They've just released their collectible card game to great success, Marvel Snap. I'm sure probably 85% of you, like me, are heavily addicted to it right now. And if Ben's name sounds familiar, it's also because he was the game director of a tiny little digital card game called Hearthstone. We speak about a range of things, and of course, we start off with how Ben got into games and how he found himself where he is today. It may not surprise anyone to learn that his father had 1,000 board games, complete with a mandatory family board game night, how Ben got his job at Blizzard, how Hearthstone spun up, the seed of the idea there. We even speak a little bit about the WoW trading card game. And then, of course, we track forward to Second Dinner and how they went about landing the Marvel license. And we drill into some incredibly insightful, tiny little design things with big repercussions. We speak about little victories within gameplay. We speak about the little finite wins of coding and animating the hand of cards in Hearthstone, even down to the 3-lane decision in the Snap Cube in Marvel Snap. It's an absolutely insightful conversation. I'm sure there's something in here, whether you're into the big creative or like sweating the small stuff. Enjoy.
Assemble.
Ben, welcome.
It's amazing to be here. I'm super excited to chat about all these things.
About you. We're going to chat about you. I'd be excited too. No one's invited me to a podcast to chat about. Oh no, actually, I've been on a couple. I lie. It's my favorite topic. So yeah, I understand. But no, don't worry. We'll chat about some games. I'm sure there were some other people along the way as well. We'll get into it. But no, thanks for joining us, man. It's really great to get the chance to chat.
Oh, I'm super excited. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem whatsoever. So, we tuck straight into it here on the Game Maker's Notebook with the age-old question, how did you get into games? We like to draw a line between your first interaction with a game, your first memory or experience with a game, and then how that or another moment sort of sparked your little path into where you are now through Blizzard and Second Dinner. So take us away.
I started very young. My parents had an Atari, and so I used to play a bunch of Atari games.
Classic.
But my dad was also a huge board game aficionado. So I remember, I guess it was the late 90s, he counted his board games. He had over 1,000 board games.
Right. So you're not really aficionado, like board game sicko maybe is probably like.
Right, exactly, yeah. I don't think there were many people who had a bigger board game collection than my dad in the late 90s. Board games have kind of become a much bigger thing, but back then they weren't.
Yeah, true.
And we had to get most of our games imported from Germany because that was where the big board games was happening.
Direct from Essen to the Brode household.
Exactly. Yeah. And we used to have mandatory family game nights where we weren't allowed to go out on Friday nights. We had to stay home and play board games with the family, which almost always ended in somebody getting sent to their room
yes,
for
of course,
poor behavior.
Of course. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. And so that mandatory, let's hone in on this a little bit. Mandatory board game night. Was it the new board game? Was there a special part to mandatory board game night? Was it always a new one each week, or was it a classic that you went to?
Both. We had so my parents, my uncle is what's the right word? Not a lumberjack. Somebody who creates a crafter of wood.
Right. Yes. I have no idea, but the crafter of wood. Yes.
Yeah, crafter of wood furniture. So he made floor to ceiling shelves for like a bunch of the walls in the house to shelve all these board games. And one of the shelves was dedicated to brand new board games that are still in the shrink wrap. And so sometimes we would go to the new shelf. Sometimes we pull out a favorite classic, but yeah, we played a lot of board games.
Was there a collector? Was there a collector aspect for your dad as well? Was some in the shrink wrap not allowed to be opened, or was it just like no, we got to have them all, got to play them all?
It wasn't. There was not some future vision of like monetizing on the collection. It was just kind of a hoarding instinct, I think. Really,
this wasn't the Beanie Babies of board games, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Cabinet maker. Is that the wood making person? Cabinet maker? Is that the job title?
No,
it's another one. All right, it'll come to us. 3 a.m. tomorrow or through the podcast. Yeah, stay tuned, everyone.
Just like yelling it out right now.
You idiots. Yeah, I know. Okay, so
carpenter.
Carpenter. Okay, right. Okay, yeah. Cabinet maker is little woods. Carpenter is big woods. Okay, we've got it. Thank you, everyone. Please don't stop listening to the podcast. Stick with us. All right, so we've got the Atari. You're playing the Atari at home, and you've got the board games as well, of course. I love these questions as well because the picture starts painting itself immediately, right? Like you can already see like 1 + 1 = 2. So take us a step further. What happened from there?
Well, I got early on, I started getting into making games, and my dad used to have his business cards from his job, and I would steal them and make card games on the back of his business cards.
Oh, wow.
Actually, I saved all my business cards when I got my first job with the imagination that I would someday make card games on the back of my own business cards.
That's awesome.
And I skipping ahead a little bit, I did it. The first prototype for Marvel Snap is on the back of my business cards from when I
That's awesome.
went to Blizzard. Yeah.
Is it? When they were Blizzard business cards. Your old
they're like from my job in QA when I first got.
There's someone from legal at Activision Blizzard right now. It's like, got him. There we go. Finally, Marvel, the whole IP is ours. Yeah. Ben Brode took down Disney finally.
But I started getting into making prototypes of games, and I really got into making my own games in high school when I got a TI-82 calculator. And you could program those things to do anything. And so I learned how to do their very painstaking line-by-line coding language and made a bunch of games on that platform.
I never coded. The coding didn't happen on the calculator, right? This is absolutely new. Oh, you like actually coded on the calculator, didn't plug it into a computer or anything.
That's right. So you had to it didn't have like a full keyboard or anything. No. So it was
incredible.
I did get the TI-92 calculator, which is now discontinued because it's too much of a computer to use on standardized tests.
Oh,
but it had a full QWERTY keyboard, and that was very exciting for 17-year-old Ben.
Yeah, I bet. So can you remember any of the games that you made?
So I started by tweaking games that other people had to like improve performance or add little bits. But I eventually started making like text adventures. I made a little basketball shooting game where you're just kind of going left and right and you have to try and get the basket in the basket.
So it wasn't just you're actually like optimizing other people's games as well. There was like a performance aspect for you as well.
That's how it always starts, is editing someone else's stuff, which is why the Warcraft 3 editor is one of the greatest moments in games history.
Just
so many genres popped out.
Open.
But it was like this games distribution platform where you also got the source code of every game you played. And so you could start by just making your favorite thing OP. And then from there, you learned the tool and got to build whatever you wanted.
Some of the biggest games in the world came from that, right?
Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah, all the big genres like tower defense, MOBAs, auto battlers. I mean, they all could trace their roots.
Of course, tower defense. I forgot that was a Warcraft 3 mod as well. Yeah. And so did you fiddle around in Warcraft 3 as well? You were tinkering around with that?
I did. I started with Duke Nukem 3D and Warcraft 2 mods.
Right,
those were where I just made tons. I graphed paper, graphing out the levels I was going to build.
And did you know at this point like that you wanted to get into games? Like how old are you at this point, Ben?
It was high school, so I would have been like 16, 17, 18 years old.
And were you like on the path to be a doctor or a board game distributor, or was it like, no, I'm going to be a game designer or programmer or...
So my dad was an engineer, and so I just kind of followed his footsteps. I said, okay, I'm going to be a software engineer. So I went to school for computer science.
All right,
I did not graduate. I'm not good. I'm not good at school.
Graduating's for suckers anyway. You know?
Yeah. But that was just kind of my imagination. I had always had in the back of my head, like, it would be amazing to be a level designer for Blizzard, but
Yeah.
I did not realize. So I just ran. The only school I got into was UCI, which is University of California at Irvine. And I did not realize that Blizzard was on UCI campus.
Oh, I didn't know that either. Wow.
Yeah, literally on campus. So I did not realize that until my buddy got a job there. And then I was like, hold on.
They're here.
What? That was the, that changed my whole life. Just happened to be in the right city.
The call was coming from inside the house, so to speak. Okay, so then you were just like locked on, right? Am I guessing correctly that you had this vision and then they're right there? Was that moment? I had a similar moment in my career where I was like, what, games don't just come off a magic conveyor belt? Like you can make them. Yeah. And my skill set, there are people like, I thought it was just, when I was a kid, someone had showed me programming and they were like, and they said something that just like, it's amazing how impressionable kids are, right? And people don't realize they were like, said something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing, of course, this is for maths nerds, or like, you need to be really, really good at maths to do this. And so I immediately didn't identify with that. I was just like, and there was no like mathematicians or programmers in my family. So I was just like, okay, not for me. It's the forbidden fruit, whatever.
Yep.
And then later on, I found out that there were writers and game designers and stuff in games. And I was like, oh, okay, I don't have to do that thing to make games. And it was like that pivotal moment. Was it a similar thing for you when you heard about Blizzard being on campus that you were like, oh, that's it?
It was. So at the time, I was working at a small like startup. It was more of like a incubator or something, and we were trying to make a massively multiplayer online role-playing text-based game for Nokia phones. And it was in the year 2001, 2002. It was a horrible idea. Yeah. And none of us had made video games before. So it was just like an impossible task. And there was one guy who started the video game development club at UCI. His name was Omar Gonzalez. He joined the company and he did the only actual work that anybody did at that company. And then he got the job at Blizzard, and the job was night crew game tester. He was working 7 p.m. to 4 a.m.
Like night at the museum style. Like in Blizzard,
And I was like, yo, I'm up to 4 a.m. playing video games anyway. This sounds like a dream job. So the problem with that shift, and Irvine specifically, is everything closes here at 9. It's like completely dead after 9 o'clock. And so it's a struggle to find where to eat lunch, because lunch break is at 10 p.m. And so I was working at a pizza place nearby. I was the shift supervisor. So what happened was Omar would call me and say, hey, yo, we need lunch. I would get a bunch of pizzas and I would shut down the restaurant and take the last delivery out over to Blizzard. And I would get in and I would meet the people and I would say hi. And that was kind of my in.
Do things like this happen anymore? Does this happen in the industry? Some pizza guy right now, the future game director of Blizzard? Like, is this happening? Is like the next God of War, like game director, like doing a milk run right now? Like,
I mean,
in our time, this is like, so like Todd Howard started by just walking into Bethesda or something like that and like just dropping a piece of paper on the counter. It's crazy. Like, I think that's Gail. Yeah. Okay. So you're the pizza guy dropping off pizzas at Blizzard.
Yeah.
A much needed helping hand.
And that's how I got to know the crew there, is when they opened up positions. I applied and ended up getting the job. But it was a really fun job. There's some amount of these kinds of jobs when you're working 80 hours a week on World of Warcraft or whatever. Yeah. Like, it's unclear if it was a good job or if you just like trauma bonded with everybody else.
We just recently did a podcast episode with Josh Sawyer, and he was talking about his time at Black Isle as well. And like, just back then, what we now know to be absolutely unacceptable game development practices, right? Or work practices in general. But at the time, you kind of almost had no idea. I don't know if management did, like the management probably knew it was wrong to some degree or whatever. But like when you're in it and when you're young and like you don't, and there's nothing in the industry saying like, hey, it's probably bad. You and your housemates should not all work at through the night and to work at the same place. But it's like you kind of don't realize that it's this weird fugue state that you get into. So many of us back in those days went through it for better or for worse.
Yeah, and some of my closest friends are still some of those people.
Some of those folks. With. Wow. Do you still live in the area, Ben? Are you still around that same area? Like, yeah. So when we started Second Dinner, we were all still working at Blizzard, so we started very close to Irvine area. Yeah. So we're now we're fully remote.
or at least hybrid. So, but I still live here. My kids are going to school here. It's you got roots. It's hard to go anywhere else.
Of course. So Second Din is your current studio that you founded with one of the folks that you worked with at Blizzard, right?
Yeah, me and Hamilton. Hamilton was the executive producer on Hearthstone. We worked together for 10 years on Hearthstone, and then
Dynamic
we started
duo.
the studio together in 2018, and we added a couple other founders back in those early days.
Yeah, heck yeah. All right, so let's rewind back to Blizzard. So you're on as the night shift game tester, and how long are you doing that for? Like, and was it on World of Warcraft?
So I started working on the Warcraft 3 expansion, and actually it was really great for me because I learned a lot about quality assurance. But the task that I was given eventually was to test the Mac Warcraft 3 editor. So I had to learn just like everything about the editor. And I did not really know it very well until I got that job. And so I just started pouring out maps just to test to make sure it was all working correctly and submitting bugs on that stuff. And I loved it. It was so much fun. And I made a ton of maps. And that was where I really kind of felt like I could have a future in game design.
Was that a pure accident, or do you think that there was some intelligent manager who was watching from afar going like, yes, learn, child, learn the maps. Like he's the chosen one, or do you think they were just and do this shit? And
it wasn't an accident that I was given that task because I was very already gravitated. I was starting to automate testing and people were like, okay, he understands the tool. Let's do it. But I will say I was given a really cool opportunity. I did QA for several years. I did World War. I was one of the environment leads for World of Warcraft. I did Warcraft expansion. I worked at the Diablo 2 110 patch, which was really fun. And then I got to there was a moment where there was a position opening on the creative development team.
Yeah.
And the head of QA, Michael Gilmartin, said, "Hey, we as the heads of tech support and quality assurance and customer service, we can nominate people from our orgs to be considered for this position. Great. I'm nominating you." For this, I think you'd be great at it. And
so just put a pin in that for a second. What is, just for folks who are unfamiliar with maybe Blizzard's structure?
I started at Blizzard in 2003. The company was about 300 something people. Yeah. And then this must have been in 2004.
And the creative development team, what's the purpose of the creative? I mean, it's in the name, but specifically what were you applying for? What did this mean for you?
The way it started was that the development team was tired of taking screenshots for the marketing team, and they needed someone to take screenshots. So that was kind of like the genesis, but it grew. It grew beyond that. There was illustrators. There was a historian whose job was to like really make sure that the Warcraft IP and the Starcraft IP and the Diablo IP had consistent storytelling across all the ways it was.
That's so insane. I remember hearing that as a gamer, like back in the day, that was actual job at Blizzard. It was something you would tell your friends at LAN parties. Like, they have an actual historian there to like just make sure everything's. It was so many cool points from it. Yeah, fuck, crazy.
But the thing that really was getting started at the time was licensed products, and so I started working on the World of Warcraft paper role-playing game, and eventually transitioned into doing board games, which is my thing. And then the World of Warcraft trading card game that Upper Deck was making. That was where like I started putting all of my focus. I got all in on that game.
Now you had a board game, because this is the Ben Brode lineage is like collectible card games, right? Like that you've come through here. But had you, in that whole board game collection that your father had out of those 1,000 games, was there a trading card contingent? Like, were you mainlining Magic since the 90s or something? Or?
Certainly. Yeah. So my first starter deck was revised, and I started right around when the Dark was out. And for every family Christmas, birthdays, everybody would get 6 packs of the newest set, and we would do a sealed deck tournament for that person's birthday or for Christmas.
That's awesome.
or whatever. So we for decades we played sealed decks against each other as a family. We played tons and tons of Magic together. I still play Magic.
That's so wholesome. I love it. That's incredible, man.
Fuck yeah. I've played for 27 years or something.
Now, just to be fair, I'm Magic illiterate. So I'm well aware of the game. We have people at the studio that are like playing all the time, but I've you know how you can just spend like your entire life in and around games and board games and just like not trip over Magic and fall into it. I've somehow managed to do that. So
it's okay. That's Dungeons and Dragons for me. I've not.
Interesting. Did you do much like pen and paper role playing with your family and everything, or was that sort of like a different type of board game?
We did it
What?
once. My brother brought a DM in, and I decided I wanted
Yeah.
to make a mercenary character. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to be like a mercenary.
Yeah.
It's going to be great. And we enter this town, and they say, hey, people are going to the old ruins. They're not coming back. Go find out why, and I'll give you some gold. And I said, gold, you say? Let's do it. And so that we run as a party. We go over there. We see the ruins, and there's goblins everywhere. And my family was like, let's kill the goblins. And I said, why? No one's paying us to kill goblins. Let's go back and tell them why the people are disappearing and get paid. And they're like, no, we don't split up the party. You stay together. I said, I'm going back. I'm going to get paid. You guys might die. I'm just going to get the money. And my dad said, go to your room. And that was the end of my first D&D session.
And your dad
just been like a great...
never invite that boy here again. He's not to come to this house again. Him and these pen and paper role-playing games. We're a board game family, son. Amazing. All right, so you're at Blizzard, you're doing creative development, and you started on this Upper Deck. So were you actually a part of the Upper Deck trading card game, like sort of licensing team? What were you doing with the Upper Deck crew?
Yeah, so the Upper Deck came and pitched the WoW TCG to me and Chris Metzen and Lisa Pearson, Brian Shea, a bunch of the licensing folks at Blizzard. And it was interesting because they had an idea. Basically, like, it was really, really hard to make a trading card game at that time in 2004, 2005. There had been really successful games like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, and Magic. Not a lot of other stuff.
Were they doing them at the moment? Because I was a basketball card collector when I was a kid. Also, actual side note, I was this is my little humble brag. Trent Custer's trivia claim to fame. When I was 12 years old, I was in the Pokemon trading card game TV commercial here in Australia.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so
we have a very similar card game heritage here.
Yep. And then we made our Mellow as well, so it's very similar too. So, but the ad was, did a little sidebar for a moment. The ad was, me and some other kid are playing, and we're playing, cards to each other. And the concept is that as we play the moves, we're in this like dark room, it's very noir. And as we play the moves, they're actually happening in real life. And so I play like Eradicate Bite or something, and a chunk is bitten out of the table. And he's like, and then the sort of piece de resistance, the coup de grace of the ad is he plays Mud Slap. And they loaded me up, a 12-year-old child, and they had these PVC pipe like cannons, like gas compressed, and they poured like this mixture of like mud that was like food dye, McDonald's thick shake thickener, and KY jelly, like down these things. And I don't know if you could do this these days, if the IOH&S wouldn't have it, but then they shot it at my face. And it's like, they just coated me in this mud. But when it finished at the end, the other kid was a real piece of work. And he just straight up asked for, because they were doing pack shots, for the end of the ad. It's like, Pokemon trading card game commercial or whatever. And they have the packs there. And he just said, can I have those? And I remember the prop standby, or whoever was there, it was just like, yeah, sure. and I was like, I was mortified. I was such a polite kid. I was mortified that he would ask. I was like, that's so rude. But at the same time, I was like, I want it. And then he just goes, do you want it? And I was like, yeah. And so then they gave us like a whole deck. So we got like the starter decks, and then we got a whole pack of boosters. And then they gave us like a color game, Pokemon Game Boy, the limited edition one. Awesome. And I just sat at home with my brother, and we just opened up the booster pack. So I had almost the entire set.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And so Pokemon trading, anyway, long way to say Pokemon trading card
the mud
game.
Slap.
Yeah, that was my game, Pokemon trading cards, until it was banned at our school. Huge political issue, banned at our school. But I wasn't aware of, other than that, I was doing like collecting basketball cards and stuff like that. And I knew they were Upper Deck. But did Upper Deck have other trading card games at the time? Or was this them sort of trying to break in? They
did. And they had the Versus Marvel card game. And then they also they're the United States publisher for Yu-Gi-Oh!
Right, gotcha. So they had a foot in the game already, yep.
Yeah. And they were trying to think, how do we get something huge? And one of the guys there, Corey Jones, said the way you got to do it is to tie yourself to a huge video game.
Yeah.
And put in-game items in packs of cards. That way people will at first buy the packs to get this thing that they really want.
Yeah.
And that will get them in the door and get them playing. And it'll give you the critical mass you need. Because these card games, these big card games, all about critical mass. Yeah. If you can't find someone to play against, you can't play the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you have to have a bunch of people playing the game. And that was the I think the genius idea that spawned the World of Warcraft trading card game.
And how long into World of Warcraft was that? Like, how long had WoW been out for at that point?
is just not that long. I don't even think I'd have to look it up. I believe the WoW trading card game launched around the same time as the Burning Crusade, maybe a little bit before, because the second expansion was it's called Through the Dark Portal.
But WoW wasn't slow to start, so good. It was the big video game they were looking for, I'm sure. So you get the pitch. What are your thoughts? You remember it? You're like, okay, cool.
Yeah. So it was, to me, as a card game nerd, it was very, very exciting. Obviously, I love World of Warcraft. I love Blizzard IP. I love card games. This is like the perfect blend. Yeah. I was like, oh, this is it. And they had the loot cards I thought were really cool, and they had something that I thought at the time was revolutionary. So a lot of designers at the time talked about Magic as having a flaw, which is that you have to shuffle your resources into the deck, and you may or may not get enough land to cast your spells. You might get mana screwed, where you just don't draw any land. You need land to play your cards. You can't play any cards if you don't get any land. And so, like, some games, you'd be like, all right, I'm shuffling my deck, and I just don't do anything. I just spend my turns discarding cards that I can't play. It's very frustrating.
Yeah.
So almost every card game that came after them tried somehow to solve the mana screw problem or the mana flood problem.
Yeah.
And so they had a cool solve for that, which is that you could just take any card in your hand you don't want and put it face down as a resource, as a land that you can use to cast other spells. It worked pretty well. It made the game pretty complicated, and it was a very, very hard decision, but it solved the mana screw problem.
So what was your role then on that? So they pitch, you're interested. Obviously, Upper Deck is licensing it. Did you have any further involvement beyond that? Were you working with them on? Were you even considered a game designer at this point, Ben? Like, what's the?
No, I was my title was producer, and my role was to be the stalwart at Blizzard who makes sure that any licensed Blizzard products felt like something we could put our brand on. We could say this is a licensed Blizzard product. I will say that we were not great partners. We were already Blizzard's bar for quality was higher than almost anyone else in the industry, and so like people who were not used to operating at this kind of level of fine tooth comb or whatever were like, what? Why does this matter? What are you guys doing? And so we got really in deep, and I think we were very frustrating partners for a lot of our partners.
Yeah.
But we made sure that the stuff was good.
Yeah. They were Arthur, what does it matter, man? Come on, tomato. It's fine. Relax, dude. We're going to sell some cards.
To be fair, Upper Deck's people, they hired a lot of really deep Warcraft nerds who also cared a lot. But when you're making literally hundreds of pieces of art, and like a lot of people in the fantasy art industry, you tell them to paint a goblin, they paint a Lord of the Rings goblin.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And our goblins just don't look anything like that. Or gnome, like most people draw like a guy with a pointy hat. It's like a garden gnome. And so we had to be like, gnomes have 3 fingers, they're 3.5 heads tall. Like, it's, you don't look like
that. So interestingly, you just said something in passing there that I want to drill into. They were actually creating art for this, because I know a lot of that art made its way into Hearthstone as well, right? They were actually creating this art on the Upper Deck side as well.
Yes. So they had a huge team of artists that this is how all card games work. This is all outsourced, a lot of freelance artists. Yeah. But they went and got people from like everywhere. Like Todd McFarlane did art for the World of Warcraft trading card game. Todd Lockwood. I mean, they had like some of the best fantasy artists of the day doing art for the WoW trading card game.
Hell yeah. And so, so you're on the WoW trading card game. At what point, because I had the exact same thought at some point, later than you and the folks at Blizzard, I will admit, because I heard the other day how early you were working on Hearthstone, and we hadn't even founded our company at that point. But at what point did all of this happening, and you being a producer on, the TCG, and it being external to Blizzard, at what point did Blizzard or yourselves turn around and say, we should make a digital first card game?
So it happened because of Corey Jones, who was the guy who started the WoW TCG at the Upper Deck side. He actually moved over to Blizzard to run licensing for Blizzard.
Oh,
so they kind of
flip
sides. And he said, hey, listen, if we're going to compete with all these other card games, critical mass is the issue. You need to be able to play anytime against anybody we need a digital version. At the time, Magic the Gathering had Magic the Gathering Online, which is a tool you could use to play Magic Online. It was the way that people would just kind of grind lots of games to get good at tournaments to then play tournaments.
Is this a digital version of Magic, or is this like some spell table type thing? Or
it was a digital version of Magic.
Yeah, okay,
it's kind of like
just a straight conversion type thing.
Yes, it's almost not a game. It's more of a tool to play Magic. They have made more game-like versions since then with Magic Arena, but this is pretty old. This is like they made it in 2001 or something. So it's like anyway, it's they had that, and it was that we were trying to compete with the other big players in the space. So and simultaneous to that, Blizzard was feeling left out of some big trends, right? Obviously, MOBAs were starting to get humongous.
Yeah,
that was born inside World.
Yeah,
inside
that's got a sting,
right?
It's got to surely it stung some people. Yeah,
Blizzard was a slow moving thing. It takes a long time to make Blizzard games, and so it's not easy for a company like that to whip to the latest, the latest exciting opportunity. And so there was kind of this desire in the studio to start a team that could chase opportunities.
Yeah.
And so there was that desire and then this opportunity to make a digital card game. And those two things came together at the same time to form what we called Team 5, but eventually became the Hearthstone team.
All right. And so at what point did you sort of move from, or like, tell me how that sort of got from just the kernel of an idea into Blizzard? Because I know it was in development. What time did that happen that you were just mentioning? That sort of those two ideas coming together and it spinning up?
The first time I had any conversations about this or officially did work for it was June of 2008.
Yeah, right.
And at the time we were we already knew that there were some core problems with moving a game that's physical like that into a digital space. There's all this weird stuff where you're like in these games where you're like, okay, I attack, and your opponent goes, okay, I take 3.
Yeah.
Or they might say, oh, hold on, back up. Before you attack, I'm going to tap your creature.
Yeah.
There's all this implied just kind of skipping of priority passing.
Yeah.
And like the ability to rewind time in real life based on my body language and like how, like whether I asked explicitly for permission or not.
Yeah, totally.
That you just lose in digital space.
Even the element of, as they say in poker, like playing the other player as well, which happens in TCGs too, or CCGs, right? The space above the table between the two players.
And we knew this was challenging because we had played Magic Online and there's so much priority passing. A lot of the game is just like, do you want to play something? No. 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 Yes, I do want to play something.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to solve that problem. And that's where we spent the first 6 months or so building prototypes of the WoW trading card game, with priority passing, stuff like that. But that was the earliest. I wasn't even on the team. There wasn't even really a team. It was just one guy, Ray Gresco, who was eventually was the executive producer of Overwatch and Diablo.
Yeah.
But he built the prototype. He was like building it all himself, and I was advising on some of this, ways to make this particular problem better.
Yeah. And so, wow, 6 months just on that one problem. And were you was it sort of born out of the the WoW TCG, or were you kind of starting from scratch entirely? Were you like, no, we're going to do something different? Or did you have intentions to sort of augment that into a digial form?
So at first we were making the World of Warcraft trading card game online.
Yeah,
but
right. Yeah.
As the team grew, the guy who was brought on to lead the game from the design side, he was the first lead designer, eventually the game director. His name is Eric Dodds. One of the most brilliant designers of all time. He was the first game designer on World of Warcraft. He did a bunch of stuff on World of Warcraft. Then he came over, worked on Diablo 3 for a while, and then he came over and worked on Hearthstone.
Amazing.
And we took the judge test for the WoW TCG. And if you've ever tried to take a judge test for one of these physical card games, like the rules of Magic are like over 100 pages, single spaced or whatever. It's
explain
ridiculous.
what for our listeners here. Explain what the judge test is.
So in a physical tournament for card games, the rules are so complicated. All the edge cases, you need actual judges. It's kind of like a referee in a sports game.
Yeah.
So at any point during the match, somebody can raise their hand and go, "Judge!" And then the judge comes over and makes a ruling on what's going on, and then the game can continue. Because it's not a digital game, right? In a digital game, the game can tell you the rules.
Yes,
you can just just do what it's supposed to do. But in a physical game, you just get stuck if there's a disagreement on those rules. So you have to have these judges. So the judge test, I have taken the judge test. I wanted to be a judge when I was a kid for Magic. I've taken it many times. I failed every time. It's really complicated. And so we took the judge test for the World of Warcraft trading card game. And Eric failed the judge test because it's incredibly complicated. He said, we will never make a game with these rules because it was
too much.
Yeah, it was this incredible insight that the state of card games was too complicated for the mass market, and now we needed to pivot into something where it didn't have dumbass rules. It was really simple to understand. Yeah, it left us in this limbo actually, because at the time we were still making the WoW TCG. We just started changing a couple of the rules, and we were like, "What is this game?" It was like this Frankenstein thing that we didn't quite understand.
Was there a point where you just broke away from the mothership entirely with your little more nimble fighter?
Yes. So it was this moment. I went to Gen Con, and at Gen Con, it's a board game convention, and there's this huge show floor, and there's all these people showcasing their new board games and card games. It's just, it's basically heaven for me. It's so much fun. And one of the games that they were showcasing was called Battle Spirits, and it's a card game, and it's a pretty interesting card game. But they have a mana system where they have blue little mana crystals, and you just get one every turn. And there's some more rules about how the way mana works, but I was like, oh my gosh, this is so simple. And at the time we had actually been using blue little crystals to represent, it was complicated, but we were also using blue crystals to represent mana. And so I said, hey, what if instead of like playing cards in your hand face down to represent mana, what if you just get mana? Just one a turn, just like Battle Spirits. And at that moment, we did a couple play tests, and we're like, yo, this is more than twice as fast because you're not making this really hard, really awful decision about what card you never want to play again. It's also like really, really fun and much simpler. It's still all the fun without, so much of the complexity of the resource system. That was the moment we said, we could do anything. We don't have to, we're not bound by the past here. Let's come up with something brand new. And we spent the next almost 2 years designing the game from that.
And so what point was that breakaway moment? What year was that?
Oh, it would have been in 2009.
2009. So you've been on it for about a year or so now. Then you spent another couple of years, 2011. And at that point, were you ready to do some sort of, I know you did a friends and family beta at some point. Like, when was the first time?
We first built the whole game in Flash. And we did a bunch of play tests in Flash. I mean, you have to remember, this is 2009. This is before the App Store. This is before iPads existed, right? Like, this is a long time ago. Flash was like the thing. This is like how people made video games.
It was just going to be a Flash game. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well, we seriously considered shipping the prototype, which was in Flash at one point, which would have been a huge mistake. But we built the whole thing in Flash, and it was really nice because we were very small. We were a 4-person team because most of the team had like emergency moved over to work on StarCraft 2 to make sure that game got to ship. And they would come back and help play test and give like really impactful advice every week. But for the most part, there was 4 of us who were like actively working on like what would eventually become Hearthstone. And then when we got to the point where all those folks got to come back after their stint on StarCraft 2, we had a prototype everyone could play and agree this is fun. And so the vision sharing was really easy. We all just knew what we were building. We just had to go build it. And actually, at that point, I started doing more client engineering and less game design because we had so much of the game built out. We just had to like get it to be real.
So were you coding for most of this time as well? Were you like your software engineering degree, quote unquote?
Yeah. So I did
coming into effect here.
I did not know how to do Flash programming when I started, but
I was
like
script for Ben.
Yeah, but I learned it while on the job, and I took over for the ActionScript engineer who left for a different company. So I took over development of the Flash prototype at one point and helped bring it to the point that it got to. But then I learned C#, and as a side project, I made an iOS version of one of my favorite card games, Brawl, which is a real-time fighting card game. I got to meet the designer. His name's James Ernest, and I was like, yo, you should put this game on the App Store. It's incredible. And then he's like, I don't know how to do that. I was like, I'll do it. So I made it. Blizzard had a side projects program, so they approved it, and I shipped it. It was commercially available on the App Store. So I was the first person, I think, on my team who had made a game in Unity, which is the eventual platform.
Yeah, what you ended up using. Yeah.
So I mean, I would say way less client engineering experience than anyone on the engineering team, but I had shipped a game in Unity, so I got to do like the input system for Hearthstone. I did the way the hand works, and I did the history and some of the collection manager stuff. I did a bunch of client engineering stuff. I was not a good programmer, so there's still I feel bad for everybody who has to work in my legacy code on that team. I was very new, but we were all hands on deck trying to get this thing out.
So I actually want to talk about the hand and how it behaves in Hearthstone a little bit, because so to switch lanes to what I was doing around about this time is 2011, we founded our studio, but it wasn't a studio at the point. We wanted to just make a game. So a few of us had come together because, the App Store was out and we were, sort of board game. I wouldn't say, not in your presence, I wouldn't say that we were fanatics. We were maybe board game rookies in your presence, standing alongside you. But we liked board games, Ben, okay? Anyway, we would come together and we would play them. And it just so happened that, Blake and Ty and a couple other guys that we brought on board, like Blake and Ty and I worked at a studio called Taurus, and we would role play on like Wednesday nights, pen and paper, and we'd play, Dark Heresy or Star Wars, D6 or whatever it might be. And so there was this lineage of board games in us, and we were all playing on the iPad at the same time. We were playing like these board game ports, these horrific ports that it just seemed like some of these big board game companies like Asmodee or whoever were just farming out these classics to, I don't know if this is true, but this is what it seemed like to us, farming out these classics to just like web app developers, or all the crew that were just diving onto the App Store as soon as it started, right?
Yep.
And it hurt us deeply being game developers. And so we were like, there's so much potential here. And so we were like, no one's doing because then the iPad came out and no one was doing a digital first board game or card game or anything. And we were like, why is no one doing this? Of course, you and your team are in the background, right? But we were like, we can do it. And funnily enough as well, because Blizzard is we're having all these conversations while Blizzard and you and the folks are working, like one of the biggest and best studios in the world are working on this problem. And we're like, we can come out and be best in genre, blah, blah, because we'd been in games for a bit. We'd shipped a bunch of stuff at our studio. Finally, we can make something and we can keep it small and light. But some of the interesting things that came of it, that digital, like we spent so much time on the hand and how the hand behaves in our Mellow, and, just how cards sort or what happens when you touch it, the behavior of it. Even 3 years post-launch, like we changed the cards to be 3D, they were just on a 2D plane. So the hand, coding the hand and that being a part of your baby there at Hearthstone, what was it coming to it that, do you remember particular things that stood out to you, or what? Because it's such a particular, it's something I think that just knocked people away when Hearthstone came out was the game feel. And the hand is such a huge part of that.
I'm really proud of it. I completely agree with you. The hand is really hard to get right.
Yeah.
And the interface is just like this hallmark of great Blizzard games. It's, one of their values is control is king. And the way in which you interact with your hand and play your cards is so core to the way that Hearthstone feels. So we tried a lot of stuff. We had just bonkers artists on Hearthstone, just unbelievably great artists. But they had this board, this very physical feeling board, and the cards themselves felt very physical, very 3D. There's a moment where when you draw the card, it comes out of your deck and then kind of turns, become kind of flat with the plane of the camera, and then goes into your hand. That moment is when I think so many people fell in love with Hearthstone, when they realized, oh, this is not like any other card game I've ever seen. Every card is 3D modeled. Like, wow, that is ridiculous. But when they designed the hand, it was this beautiful arc of cards. Yeah. And so my first task was to figure out what is the correct arc. Am I using like a hyperbola, or is it a circle, or like what is the way in which this feels best? And then like how do we handle the hitboxing, right? Because like when you do this kind of arc, by its nature, like some of the cards have very little amount of them. Yeah, the cards in the middle are like covered, and if you sort them and they're not like laid in the right way, you're actually covering critical information as well. So it's even where the information is layered on the cards is super important. So, yes, right, exactly. So you want mana cost that, depending on where the numbers are, you want to like splay them, covered this direction or covered the other direction. But I remember working so hard on trying multiple things. Do we just take up a hitbox and divide it by the number of cards in your hand? Yeah. It doesn't quite like map quite exactly right. There was a bunch of things we had to do to just get so you felt like every time you wanted to mouse over a card, you moused over the card you wanted to mouse over. We needed it to. It just needed to feel
exactly that way. Yeah.
Right. And then the other,
and did you do some little fiddling? Is it one of those great video game illusions where, you know, like you actually had to fudge numbers or make the hitbox bigger so that it felt like, or it actually behaved in a way that was different to what the actual mouse was doing specifically?
Oh yeah, certainly. Yeah. And one of the big problems we tried early on was just like after we got the hitbox feeling right, we you know, what happens to the card you're mousing over? And there's two like big ways that you can solve this problem. One of them is like have a tooltip zone where like, you know, you could see the thing over here and it changes as you're mousing over stuff. They even will do it like above the card. But whenever you do that, you have two copies of the card. You have the one that's big and the one that's small. And it doesn't feel quite physical and real, which is like this critical thing for Hearthstone. And so what we did was when you mouse over a card, it gets big. But we tried so many versions of that because it needs to be instantly readable. So you can't have it animate in because that little animation is, especially when you're scrolling over, it's just like, you know, it's also like just stuff's happening everywhere, right? As you're scrolling over your hand. So what we finally landed on, this was not easy to figure out. What we finally landed on is instantly popping the card to the big size. But it didn't feel like that animation. We were missing it. It didn't feel alive. So we popped it big, but then we added a little bit of drift. Like floor, it like slowly, and then it gets slower the longer it goes. So like over multiple seconds, the card, you know, does so it like the cards like feel like they animated up so fast you didn't see the animation, but the drift is like reminding us that it did grow. You know what I mean? And that drift like came to define so many mouse overs in Hearthstone. We came out the year the Tokyo Drift was released, so we called the drift the Tokyo Drift, so that we all that little slow move it on any tooltip is we called it the Tokyo Drift.
Also, best Fast and Furious movie, by the way. They're easily.
And the other thing we did was we left the animation on when you mouse off the card. It animates back down into the hand.
Yes.
So it still feels like things are smoothly animating, but it's just an instant on. Man, I spent like the whole team. I would do a rev, and I was like, Derek, come over and try this. Is this right? Does this feel right? Like, no, it doesn't feel right. You know, okay, Dodds, come try. Does this feel? You know, and we just kind of like swapped in and out. I would try little tweaks and get advice. You know, it was very challenging to get that right.
There's something really interesting when it comes to cuts as well. Like when, you know, the jump cut in films came quite, especially in action scenes, came quite late into cinema. And it's, you know, like in some of the Bonds from the 60s were like really like brought it home in regards to like cutting large sequences of action just really short. And it's amazing how much our brains are just fine with it. And I remember talking to some friends at Valve when they were actually doing the VR, when they had VR and it was all secret and only a few of us were like let in to see what was going on in their Cronenberg like lab with the like, you know, the big machines from the ceiling look like GLaDOS or something. You put this thing on your head and they're figuring out movement. And some of the experiments that they tried, when they got to actually teleporting, they thought that it would be this like lurching sickness feeling that you would get. Yeah. But actually it was immediately just okay. Like the brain was just totally fine with it. And one of the things that they said to me that just so insightful was when you move your eyes from left to right, you don't do it smoothly. Your life is a series of jump cuts anyway. And so like the brain is actually incredibly fine with like cutting things and just interpolating animations or the in-between. It's incredible. Also something I want to hone in on too is we speak a lot on this podcast with folks who are studio heads or, you know, game directors of large games or, you know, and we talk about the business of video games or we talk about, you know, running huge projects or high level creative direction. But it's just so nice sometimes to just drill into the beauty of like interaction design. There's so much beauty in video games of those little moments, like you're saying, where you're just like fucking around with one value and you're calling your friends, you're calling your colleagues over and passing them a control. There's a real magic there. So
it's super fun.
It is. Now, I want to move from here. I mean, we could talk about Hearthstone all day. Obviously, huge success, but I want to, and it's amazing what you and the team accomplished, but I do want to get to Second Dinner. You're a new studio, and I want to get to Marvel Snap because I'm pretty sure about 87% of our listeners are going to be addicted to it right now. I was telling you just before the podcast, and I just finished the Wakanda season pass. I'm loving it. My girlfriend almost had an intervention with me. She's like, classic, like, come to bed, stop playing on your phone. You may need to actually get an AVO on my partner if I keep playing these games. But one thing that I do want to get to that, because it's just an amazing thing that you've achieved. And there's a real through line here in regards to the simplicity and the speed with which you play. But I want to talk about Hearthstone and the success that you saw there and the things that you saw once you'd launched the game, and how did that sort of shape coming into Second Dinner? And how did that shape coming into Marvel Snap and that next game? Can you remember anything in particular from around the success, or things that were maybe like confirmed for you where you were like, there's something bigger here, or there's a next step for me and some of my pals here? Had you seen it from Hearthstone and around that time? Were there things that happened during Hearthstone's success where you're like, there's more here? Like, it scratched that itch in regards to questions unanswered or things? Like, we're just getting started.
I didn't know. Actually, I was definitely not sure if that was going to be true. There's this horrible feeling, the pit in my stomach, which is just like, hey, and I just got to be part of this amazing thing that was Hearthstone with this unbelievable team of super incredible game developers. Are my best days behind me? Was this it? Was this the peak of my career?
It's possible. It happens. It totally happens.
At some point, that will be true.
Yeah.
And it's just it was like, I was pretty sure maybe that was it. And everything. But I was very, very, very lucky. Everything that's happened with Second Dinner so far has been just incredible, and we have just an amazing team. Can you hear the helicopter that's flying over my house right now?
That's my partner coming to, she's going to parachute into your, kick through your door. She's going to take you out. she's actually, God bless her, she's got COVID at the moment. And last night I was playing the game, and she got up to do something and I was like, no, I'll get it. She's like, I asked you 3 times for water. And I was like, didn't hear her. I was playing Marvel Snap. So, yeah. So Second Dinner, you, as you said, started this studio with incredible people. How did that come about? What was the moment?
Oh, sorry. We didn't ask your last question.
Yeah.
One thing that I felt was this dream we had, which is that card games are so fun.
Yeah.
And that there's just, for a lot of people, the complexity is just this unclimbable wall.
Yeah.
That people can't get into that fun, right? If you just could learn how to play these games, then you could have so much fun. And so Hearthstone was really designed to be like someone's first card game. And it was. A lot of people's first video game was Hearthstone. And it was just incredible to see all these people who never tried card games become huge fans of the genre through that. And so that's just something I just believe in my heart, is that card games are one of the most fun types of video games and games, period. And that, if you can make it accessible to people, then they'll love it. At the same time, my son was born the day that we were celebrating Hearthstone's release. And so I missed all of the celebrations at Blizzard because I was in the hospital with my wife.
Good decision. There are developers who've not made that, and it's the incorrect one. So congratulations on being a well-adjusted human being.
I appreciate that. But my life changed a lot after I had kids. Of course. And I was really craving that experience of a collectible card game in a way that would fit into my life really well, where I didn't have to spend hours sitting in front of a computer. I could have a great mobile first experience that I could play anytime, anywhere. And so that was, I didn't, to be honest, we had no game ideas when we left Blizzard. Because if we did, they would have been owned by Blizzard. And so we tried to come up with no ideas.
Yeah.
And so when we got together, we were like, we thought, okay, if we do a card game, we're just the card game guys. That's it for us. And so we started working on things that were not card games. We made some other prototypes and thought about some other directions. But once we thought, hey, this Marvel thing could really happen. Yeah. We started skinning those games with Marvel, and they just didn't work.
Yeah.
They were too focused on other things that weren't the strengths of the Marvel IP. The strength of the Marvel IP is the heroes and villains.
Yeah, of course.
And so we said, okay, we should at least try and design a card game, just in case like investors are like, what are you guys doing? Make a card game. And so we designed.
Look, we just funded a title. It's by the Hearthstone team. They're making an open world RPG. It's going to be still never. I don't know. I'm not laying my money down. No offense. Let's get that card down.
Well, it just turned out that it was the most fun game that we had prototyped.
Yeah,
we couldn't stop thinking about it, and we were like, all right, this is what we got to make.
So let's talk about Marvel. How did that come about? You decided, as you said, you've gone out on your own and you've decided to do something. You have no idea what you want to do, but it sounds like you're having conversations with Marvel in the background.
Yeah, so the guy who runs Marvel Games, his name is Jay Ong. He used to work at Blizzard with Hamilton and I. And he was he went to go run Marvel Games, and he had a strategy, which is that Marvel Games should be incredible. They should all be super good, just like Marvel movies, right? Every Marvel movie that comes out is incredible, and so you have to see the new Marvel movie. Of course, it's going to be awesome. Your expectations are really high. And he said this should be Marvel Games as well. Everyone should be amazing. And so he was looking for studios to partner with, and he's partnered with some just unbelievable studios.
Incredible
just like
stuff.
The quality of Marvel Game. Yeah, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And so he called up Hamilton and he said, hey, if you guys want to start a studio and do a mobile game, I'd love to get really high quality stuff on mobile, and I'd love to work with you guys. And so that's all nice to hear, but until the contract signed, we don't know. It's just we were like,
okay, cool.
But he followed through, and I really appreciate the Marvel team he put together is so good. Having come from the video game licensing background, I know how much of a nightmare sometimes video game licensors can be, and this team is just like unparalleled. They're so good, and they took a real big risk on us, I think, because it was just a few of us, with no games shipped as a studio, and it was really, really incredible.
It is incredible, like the resources that you hear that Marvel put behind these things, and we talk about the Blizzard historians, they're like nothing on what Marvel have on board. One of my best mates actually was him and his cousin wrote the Eternals, and so they spent like 9 months.
Wow.
9 months locked in a room at Disney. Kaz and Ryan Firpo, and
I loved the Eternals.
It's a cool little romp.
I loved it.
And we were like hearing little things as is. Like I said, my best mate, so we're hearing things. And during the pandemic as well, like we were having calls every Sunday, him and me and a couple of others. And he was talking about these guys that they would have in the writing room, that would just have these binders like full of comics. And they were like, I pictured them to be these like grizzled, like people with like cloaks on and, like long curled fingernails, but they're probably just normal people. But they were like their lore guardians essentially. And they would just sit in the writer's room, and they would like, when they would have a problem, someone would be like, oh, this in this episode from from Kirby's version of the Eternals or whatever, and they would just cite this stuff. And he was like, it was crazy. These people like computers, Marvel computers. So what was, now let's talk about, so you've got interest from Marvel, the card game's coming, you're skinning it together. Tell me about those moments that we all know and love as game developers where the rubber starts to hit the road. You get those sparks of traction on the game. Like, can you remember whether, where it started to happen, where Snap started to become a thing and you're like, oh shit, we're starting to get something here? Yeah,
very interestingly, the first mechanic was the cube, the Snap mechanic.
Oh, really?
It came from Hamilton said, I've always wanted to play a strategy game that uses the backgammon doubling cube.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, tell me more. I never played backgammon. I don't know how that works. He's like, well, you could just double the cube and the stakes go up. And I said, well, we could play test this right now. And so I booted up a game of Hearthstone, and Hamilton sat over my shoulder and he said, would you double the stakes right now? If your opponent doubled the stakes, would you retreat? And I was like, oh, I think I would. I don't know if I would. And then you play a little bit next turn. I'm like, would you double the stakes now? I'm like, I would double the stakes now. And I was like, wow, this is fun. This is like really adding a ton of skill to the game in a way that's not that complicated. I think this lets us design a game that's very easy to get into, but has this incredible skill ceiling from this one mechanic. Because I often talk about poker as a game that has never required an expansion to remain strategically deep for decades. And it's because like bluffing it's like really hard. It's such an incredibly high skill ceiling. So that was it. The Hamilton had that one insight, and that like led us on this journey of Marvel Snap.
Isn't it amazing how one mechanic? I remember I've tried to find the article. I'd love if someone could tweet at me actually with anything that they know about it. But I remember years ago, over a decade ago, I remember reading back when it was called Gama Sutra, a Gama Sutra article about this concept of the strange attractor, like a single mechanic in a game that changes the whole experience. And that mechanic is called the strange attractor. And it's like, and when you point to some of the most successful games, they seem to have them, like GTA's, wanted level, and immediately when I got to Marvel Snap and I got through a couple games and it showed me the snap mechanic, I was just like, whoa, okay. And I love that because we were talking about it before, the differences, and with us working on our Mellow and you working on Hearthstone, we would have encountered those same things in regards to like those classic issues when you're taking tabletop to digital, like communicating UI, things like that, but also that space between the players that exists above the table in a tabletop game. And this gives a persona or a personality. Like I love when I get into a Snap game and someone immediately snaps, I'm like, oh, this fucking guy. Sure. Okay, buddy. It gives a lens personality to someone. And then I'm looking at their profile picture. I'm like, yeah, you would choose Captain America as your profile picture. And it's they've just tapped a cube. And it's like, it helps build this beautiful personality and this back and forth where I'm not talking to people through the emote system or anything like that, but I can feel the person on the other side, and I get some sort of idea of who they are. It's really, really powerful stuff.
Yeah, it will exist on a layer above the game you're playing, right?
Yeah.
And this was actually something we were really worried about because for most of development, we've been all over the place on this cube. That one simple idea that started it all, the path was not straight to where we ended up. It was all over the place. But like a lot of it was like really in your face. And throughout playtesting, people were like confused by it. Like, why am I worried about this? Like, I want to play cards. What's going on here? What are cubes like? We it's just right at the end where we had this incredible insight, which was essentially, what if we just do the Hearthstone ranking system, but you can double the stakes of the game. And it was like, we had tried for years to get something to work. And then we ended up so close to home. It was kind of a funny journey.
Isn't it funny how some of those things come through right at the end? So another thing as well, like Hearthstone was a massive achievement in regards to simplifying, achieving what you set out to do when you had that moment, like simplifying that incredible, that north wall of like trading card games or collectible card games. But Marvel Snap seems to take it even a step further. Like I can be in and out of a game of Marvel Snap sometimes in less than 2 minutes, and if I play my cards right, I can scare my opponents off in maybe under a minute. But like there's something so exceptional about how much more you've slimmed it down and streamlined it. The game's like 6 turns only. That's it. And then even just like the amount that's on the card too, your energy and power, the verb set is quite tight as well. So tell me a little bit about that sort of lineage between and the journey between Hearthstone and your experience there, you and Hamilton, and now Marvel Snap, and simplifying things down further, the big wins or little wins.
Well, it's very interesting because it started with the WoW trading card game, which I think was like relatively complicated.
Yeah.
And because that was our heritage on Hearthstone, we essentially just kind of it was like a block of ice.
Yeah.
And we're like an ice sculptor, and we look at the block and we're like, I think it would look better without this chunk.
Yeah.
We like slowly start chopping away. Like, what if we got rid of responses? What if we got rid of the quest card type? What if we got rid of phases? What if we got rid of and at the end of it all, we had this like much tighter game. With way less rules. And at the whole time, we had this fear. What if it's not deep enough? Because every bit of complexity adds some amount of depth.
Yeah, you can do that. You can totally throw the baby out with the bathwater, when you're slimming it down,
And so we kept playing the game with what we called the basic decks, with just like the simplest cards.
Yeah.
And we were like, is this still fun? And every time we said, yeah, it's still fun. I think this is still fun. And then it's going to get more complicated from here. But like this simplified experience is still fun. And that experience just made me realize just how much you can get away with when you cut complexity, right?
Yeah.
If your core decision is difficult, which of these 2 cards do I play? then like you can cut almost everything else away. And with Marvel Snap, the core decision, every card you have to play it left, middle, or right, and that's a hard decision to make. Yeah, it's not, and like even if the cards have no text at all, it's like already a hard decision to like, where's my opponent going to go? Like you're setting up this context and trying to, and then snapping on top of that. And so when the core decisions are simple or are deep or interesting, then you just don't need lots of other complexity. And so we said like, what's the minimum we can get away with? I had this fantasy of like, can we do one number on each card? And we couldn't do that. It was like, 2 numbers, that's less than, almost any other card game. Let's try that, And, like that amount that we, I like to tell the story of my buddy who used to work at Riot, and he went to the bathroom and he was playing a game of Hearthstone on the toilet, like you do. Yeah. And he was playing Control Warrior, and he queued into another Control Warrior, and the game was like 30 or 40 minutes long. And at the end of the match, he stood up and his legs had fallen asleep. And he fell over and broke his leg in the bathroom at Riot. Oh my God. And I feel a little responsible for that.
Yeah, that's your fault, dude. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be that guy. That's all you, man. You and Hamlin. Is that why you left Blizzard? Was it that day? You're like, oh, well, yeah, by the way, we're leaving. We're done here. Wow.
But I'd also been very inspired by games like Clash Royale, which had like a time limit. And we're like, you can get in and out in 5 minutes. And I said, when we were first working on it, like, can we blend all this, right? Can we... that experience of having kids and trying to build a game that fit into my life really effectively, and like that fun of card games, like those were all pressures on early design for Marvel Snap.
When I talk to folks on this podcast, there's a period of creeping that I do, basically like looking all over the internet, listening to them for a week, on podcasts and things like that. Obviously to have a great conversation with them when it comes time to record it. And one of the things that I heard you say on a podcast recently, I just loved, was this notion of big wins and little wins. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you design Marvel Snap, or those little moments. Explain a little bit about this concept of big wins and little wins, and how you built that into Snap.
Well, so this is one of the many things I learned from my mentor Eric Dodds, who is just like I mentioned before, just an unbelievable game designer. He had this concept of little victories, which a game like StarCraft. You can load up, you can start building your first building, and then Zerglings are in your base and you're dead, and you did nothing. You just lose, and it's obvious you suck. There's nothing you could be proud of in that game, right? And the same is true of some games like Magic early on, where like you shuffle up your deck, you draw your hand, there's no lands in it, you can't play any cards, your opponent just does what they will with you and you lose, right? No moment in that game did you feel smart or clever or anything. And so Eric had this vision of really focusing on little victories. Only one person gets the big victory. Only one person can win the game. But if you have moments during the game where you felt smart or felt powerful, then you come away from the game and it's not just like a zero-sum experience, right? Somebody got the big win, somebody else got some little victories, they felt smart. And so we, like for Hearthstone, we intentionally didn't put many cards in like Counterspell or Control Magic. We put a lot more cards in that are responsive to what your opponent's doing. So I might kill your Tyrion Fordring, but you at least got to play Tyrion Fordring, right? I didn't just like go discard it out of your hand so you never got to play it, or blow up your mana crystals so you never got to get to turn 8. Like you got to do the stuff. And I think that's like an important feat. So for Snap, you get to do your stuff. You get to have your combo, right? You get to like play your cards. You can choose to bail out, but actually the retreat mechanic turns losses into wins sometimes.
I'm so glad you said that, because I literally was going to talk about that on this podcast as well. You dove straight into it. So explain the retreat mechanic and how it works with the Snap cube.
Yeah, so the game starts at one kind of rank point. They're called cubes. The more cubes you have, the higher your rank. So when the game starts, you're playing for 1 cube. At the end of the game, the cubes double. So now the winner's going to win 2 cubes, the loser's going to lose 2 cubes. At any point before then, you can retreat and just lose the 1 cube. Also, your opponent can snap to propose to double the stakes next turn. So then when they do snap, you have to decide, should I stay in? Because if I do, we're double the stakes. And they probably feel very confident. That's why they'd be doubling the stakes right now. Or should I bail out right now and just say, look, you got the cube. I don't want to play for higher stakes. I don't think I'm going to win this game. They could be confident, or they could be bluffing me and trying to get me to concede. And you can't quite tell which it is because you can't see their hand.
Yeah.
And so it's a really interesting kind of bluffing moment. But the thing is, when they snap and you decide to retreat, you feel smart for not having stayed in and lost more cubes. So even though you lost that game, it can still feel like a victory.
Yeah, you quit while you're ahead in a sense.
Yeah,
almost.
exactly. Yeah,
I remember when I first retreated, I was like, oh, fucked. And it said, you escaped. And I was like, that's right, I did escape. That's true. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Really hard to find the right terminology for.
Yeah, I bet. No, it's such a beautiful like little bow on that whole system. So we've spoken a little bit about reducing complexity in the game and simplicity, but another area that we haven't spoken about at all, which you and your team tackled incredibly well on Hearthstone and is obviously a whole part of this game, and where I actually believe you've brought even more simplicity and even maybe a little bit of like simplicity like in the political sense, and I'll get to it now, is on the monetization side of things. So one of the very clear absences from Marvel Snap is loot boxes, which you obviously had in Hearthstone to some degree. Talk me through, because this is obviously something that everyone who enters the mobile market, it's not a small thing. And for a new studio, even with the power of Marvel behind you, it's fucking terrifying making a mobile game these days, a free-to-play mobile game. So talk to me a little bit about the monetization process in regards to the design and how you even stepped into that thing and some of the little, the little victories along the way.
Sure. It's interesting because there's a lot of analogs for card games, but we were doing something a little bit different, right? Our total card pool is really small. We have over 150 cards, but like Hearthstone shipped with like about almost like 500 or something. Or
wow.
A lot of cards.
Shit, I didn't know that.
And released hundreds of cards a year every year since then, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And our just total number of cards is never going to be close to these other games. And so releasing like packs of cards where you could buy some number of cards at at a reasonable price, like over and over again, like we're just going to run out of stuff. So we couldn't do that. And then the other like comparable, Clash Royale, it's not a card game necessarily, but they have cards that you can collect, right? It's driven by cards. They have a few cards, something like 80 to 100, or maybe it's probably more than that now. But they also don't sell. I guess they do sell loot boxes, but like the way that their model works is you can get multiple copies and then get more power for each. Your cards grow in power, and we felt like we couldn't do that either because like the math gets really messed up, right? If you want something to be able to grow by 11% power or something, you can't have a 1-1. You got to have like
the granularity,
1/100, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, how do I beat this guy? He's got 197 power. I can get 204, I think. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, like none of the options are available to us. Like just the way that people do monetization traditionally in our genre, we can't do it. So we knew we had to come up with something new. And the big inspiration for us was Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is a collectible game where you can't buy Pokemon. You can't just like buy a pack of Pokemon. That would be ridiculous. You have to earn the Pokemon. You got to go out and get off your butt and go like catch Pokemon.
And get some vitamin D.
You can spend money, right? You can get Pokemon faster, right? You can buy incubators and more balls or whatever and incense to get more Pokemon more quickly, but you can't skip it. You got to earn it. And that was like really vibed with us, right? We're like, what if it's about the journey? What if it's not about like, welcome to Marvel Snap, please drop as much money as you can to get every card in the game, which you can do with like every other card game. But instead it's about not having all the cards, having a different collection than other people and slowly going on your journey. You could speed up the process if you want, but you can't skip to the end.
And that was sort of the seed that set you off in that right direction. Do you feel, did it sort of work was that a late realization or was it something that you had from the start? Did it work from the start when you headed in that direction?
It was a realization we had from the beginning. And it was also a very nervous realization because I don't, there's no like really obvious right answer here. And one thing, like it's important for the studio and it's important for the players that the game is successful, right? Yeah. If the game is not successful, then like it's like games that are not successful don't last that long, right? And as players that love a game, we want the game to continue to make new stuff, right? So it's a collaboration between the players and the studio to make sure that the game, exists and is profitable, so that hey, more of the thing we all love, right? So we knew that we had to get to that point, right, where the game was successful. But there's not like a lot of like people who are doing this that are like proving that this is going to work. So it's like it's pretty nerve wracking. And no, it was not like we tried many things. This was something like how do players earn cards? One of the most complicated things for us. We tried like sphere grids and like alternate games that you were trying to like earn heroes and level them up to go off on quests to get you cards. And it's sometimes not. And eventually we made something really simple. We often talk about how a lot of players won't buy cosmetics because they're focused on the core. I want to win. But if you make cosmetics like have some functional value, then they'll like enjoy it. And so we said, like, what if it's about like upgrading your cards and making your cards look more beautiful? And then on the other side of that, you get collection level, which makes it get you new cards. That can be just a really like now the cosmetics are for everyone. And we've got that feeling of a journey that you're going on that's not about having everything all at once, but you get to like really sit with each card and build decks and like learn, the strengths and weaknesses of each card. It's been really fun.
Upgrading your cards to collect more cards is genius. I love it. And the fact that your cards, the more you use them, the more you get upgradable, like little spheres for them and everything it's just so much fun. And I find myself as well, something interesting is I'm not hoarding. Like that's what it does. This notion that I'm collecting more cards or moving up that collectibles, that ladder there or my unlocks ladder is I'm just literally upgrading my cards as fast as I can. Whereas before I'd probably be like hoarding them and being like, because the spheres are specifically for that card and it's getting me more stuff, it's moving me along that progression. And then you've got the links from the season pass and everything to the collectibles. It's really beautiful. So now the game's been out for how long?
October 18th is when it came out, so not that long.
Just a month and a half.
2 months.
So tell me about the things that it's out with the teams. You started with 2, brought on a couple more. The teams of you're about 50 now, more?
Yeah, maybe about 60.
Okay.
It's been incredible. I think, I mentioned we have an absolutely unbelievable team at Second Dinner. We got it's been wild. Like just the caliber of engineers and artists and producers and designers working on this game. It's just some of the best folks I've ever worked with. They're super, super talented. And a lot of them have been in the industry for a long time, but we also have people who this is their first ever shipped game, or at least the first game that like there's a huge community of people who really care about what you're working on, right? And are like posting about it and streaming it. And so it's been really, really fun to be part of this moment with the team and just feel all the excitement around the game.
Incredible. Well, congratulations to you and the team, Ben. It's obviously, and anecdotally, your monetization works because I've sunk about $50 into it already. So you got me.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I love the game. It's just so brilliant. And, as someone who's so incredibly time poor as well, like what you've done. And, our focus as a studio too is, I don't know if I've spoken about this on the pod or whatever, but our focus as a studio is taking strategy games and making them accessible and presentable and just dumping a bunch of heart into them as well. Like we strongly feel that there's so much potential to the strategy market, but it's getting better, as time goes on. But for so long, it was just so stale in regards to like this north wall of friction getting into them, or the same tired subject matter time and time again, or just like only making strategy games for straight white dudes, like no consideration for like who else could be interested in this type of genre. And so seeing you doing the work, you and your team doing the work that, we're sitting over here as well trying to do is just it's so impressive, especially very intimately knowing the challenges that you're coming up against. I see you, Ben. I see you and your team. Congratulations. It's such an achievement.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fun.
Give us a plug. What's coming up from Marvel Snap? Tell our listeners what they got to look forward to. I think I just saw that your current season is going to end today or tomorrow.
That's right. New season comes out today. The Power Cosmic Silver Surfer's coming. This is going to be our best season yet. We got like more content than any other season, so we're really excited about it. Also, the team's really hard at work at adding artist credits to the game. So, those
cool.
are one of our most requested features. The other big thing we're working on, which I think is going to launch sometime next month, hopefully, is battle mode against friends, which will unlock the ability to finally have that grudge match against your buddy who you think you're better than. And I think it'll unlock community tournaments, which is what I'm really, really excited to see.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, hey, Ben, thanks so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and all the best to you and your team for Marvel Snap.
Thank you.
You're welcome, man.
It's been
Have a
awesome
great
to
day.
be on the podcast. Thank you so much for having me.